Hi, this is Sharos Walji from Astral Connections, and here with me I have Ron Lane Smith. To start, Ron, let me ask you a little bit about your life.
Okay, I'm from India, born, brought up in Bombay. Went to a Jesuit school in Baikala and came to Canada when I was 16, 17 and studied architecture in Winnipeg, University of Manitoba. Halfway through architecture, I decided to become a Jesuit, since we'd been brought up by the Jesuits, and they sort of impressed me with trying to do something significant with my life. I felt that being a Jesuit was a significant vocation. So after I finished architecture, I joined the Jesuits in the United States because they had a mission in India, and stayed with the Jesuits for 4.5 years till I did the equivalent of philosophical training with a PhD from Fordham University in philosophy. Then for many reasons I left the society, left the Jesuits, and went back into the field of architecture and academia as well, since I was sort of trained as a Jesuit in the teaching discipline, so to speak. So academia and architecture seemed to work for me. So I ended up practicing as an architect at times and also lecturing at times at several universities and giving guest lectures all over the place.
What made you leave the Jesuits?
Oh, lots of reasons really. Basically, disillusionment perhaps in what I could have done while with them or through them, through the society. But a lot of things. I was tired. I had done the equivalent of 7 years education in 4 years, and that's pretty exhausting. Many things. But
must have been an amazing experience.
Well, the wonderful thing about I don't know anybody that gets the time to just read and study and devote yourself to meditation, your own perfection. I mean, to focus on that for so much of one's life is something that very few people get. I don't think people being trained to be kings get that kind of immersion as a preparation. So, yeah, I was very lucky in that respect to have that opportunity to find out about myself and question and get answers that satisfied me.
I know of your passion of the Taj Mahal. Tell me about the very first time you saw the Taj Mahal.
Well, I went to India to visit between my 4th and 5th year of architecture and visited the Taj at that time. I know I had never seen it before. I had seen pictures of it, but I had never been there. And the very first time I went, somehow I felt I had been there before. There were things about it that I already knew somehow. I mean, not from what I had heard, but the very building itself was making me feel like it was a familiar experience to me. And I started to question why that had happened. Started delving into its history and its architecture, its forms. The more I delved into it, the more I became involved. It's the way, like with anybody, the more you get to know them, the more impassioned you are with the kind of person they are. The Taj is like a human being to me.
So when you saw pictures of the Taj Mahal, at that time you didn't feel that closeness to it?
Oh, no. They were just pictures of a building, like, it was a 8th wonder of the world. That's about it, But when you're there, it encompasses you. It loves you, and that is much more than looking at a picture.
So how did you go from seeing it from the first time to having such a strong passion as to want to know everything you possibly could about it?
It grows that interest grows in time. In the beginning, I just wanted to know why certain things happened visually, and then I wanted to know what was in the mind of the person that designed it, that he brought these things about. And then I investigated Shah Jahan's life, or Karam's life, and then I found that his life didn't hold all the answers. There were influences in his life from Indian architecture that he had obviously become aware of as a ruler of India. So I started looking at them, and the interest, one thing led to another, and the interest grew. The deeper I got, the more the interest grew, and the more the interest grew, the deeper I got. It was sort of a cyclical thing. So.
It's interesting, and it's interesting that it's just to do with the Taj Mahal. That maybe if it was another building, that interest could have grown
Well,
with another building.
The Taj kicked me off, but I found the more I got into it that the Taj wasn't the only building like that at all. There were other Indian buildings, as going back as far as the 2nd century AD. Some of the cave temples, some of the earliest Indian architecture has very similar principles. So that's when I realized the Taj is simply the culmination of a very long tradition, 16th centuries, 17th centuries of architecture. And it's the last of the tradition. Since then, there has not been any other buildings in India that, well, I shouldn't say there haven't been, there has been, but not by Indian architects, funnily enough. And I don't know how that happened either, but there's been a gap, and then suddenly other buildings now are starting to have the same basis for their design, same type of spirituality, you might say. But
Tell me a little bit about your travels.
oh gosh, that's a long story. I've been almost everywhere. I mean, it's the
What led you there, and what motivated you to go to one place or another in regards to your passion with the Taj Mahal?
Well, it wasn't only the Taj, it was architecture in general. I was interested in finding out why buildings are the way they are. I mean, I studied history of architecture, but it's not enough. I wanted to know what was the context of the building that made it what it was. And the context is more than just its siting and its materials, but its architect and the functions it's supposed to perform, all these things. So, and I realized, having experienced the Taj, I realized that personal experience of a building is essential to understanding it. I mean, you can see all the slides of Chartres Cathedral and not feel, or Notre Dame or anything else, and not feel anything about it, not understand what it's all about until you go there and
Visually experience it.
yeah, visually experience it. And it's not just visually, but to experience it aesthetically, experience it with your whole being, hear the sounds and smell the different odors that are involved, and the architecture and all kinds, see people moving through it, and just experience it totally as a building. It becomes much more meaningful, much more significant to you, and hypnotic. You become it becomes you become united to it in that way. And that's the goal of almost all architecture. Good architecture, that's what I think a good architect strives for, is to bring a certain contiguity between the person and the building, and the total person, not just his body, because he's there, but his mind and his interests and his emotion, everything. Bring that all into play with the building with which he's interacting.
Can you tell us a little bit about your architectural endeavors, your career?
Well, my own designs, I've tried to incorporate some of the... It's very important to have a client that allows you to do what you want. Generally, clients are very demanding and they know what they want, and you just fulfill their needs. But if a client allows you to bring in some of your own personality and your own interests, then I've, again, been very lucky in that I've had the odd client that has allowed me to incorporate some of the principles of not only of the Taj, but of humanity. I like my buildings to be human. I like them. I like people to feel comfortable in them, to feel like they've been there before, even though they haven't. like clothing. So that's what I've tried to do. And as I say, there have been the odd client, few and far between, that allow you to do that. Most often they just want you to draw some plans and give them what they want. It's their building, they're spending the money, they're going to live in it. So they impose most of the restrictions. But occasionally there's the client who allows you a certain leeway to contribute what you want into the building. When that happens, I grab it. I mean, it's
And so give me an example of one such building.
oh, that I did. Well, there's a little bank in Adelaide that I did many, many years ago, and the only thing I can say about it is that when I started to work in this company as a design partner, I told the other partners the only thing I had to offer was to make what I designed human. And it was 5 years later that I designed this building, and they had forgotten it. And I remember the senior partner, when he first saw it, saying to me, "I'll say one thing, Ron, this is the most human building I've ever seen." And as far as I was concerned, that was it. I mean, that's all I had to achieve. That's all I had striven to achieve, and somehow it had come through. So if it came through with him, that was enough. It only takes one other person with whom to get that rapport. And as far as I'm concerned, the Taj is the same. It only takes one other person with whom it relates that totally. And if it does that with me alone, it's fulfilled its goal, its end. And it has.